for watching my Complementary Nutrition presentation for NHM 509. My name is Becca Reese, and I have chosen to do this review and presentation on intuitive eating and its effect on mental health in adults. So what is intuitive eating? It was introduced in 1995, and the basis of intuitive eating consists of three parts. Basically, the unconditional allowance to eat, meaning that you don't have to earn food or do anything to earn the ability to eat. Eating based on physical causes rather than emotional ones, which I'm sure we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form. So eating based on physical hunger rather than boredom, or if you are eating for an emotional or even a mental reason, or even if you're trying to procrastinate and you're eating instead of doing a task, something along those lines. So we're eating based on physical hunger rather than any of those outside causes. And eating based on satiety cues, so meaning we eat when we're hungry, but also we stop when we're full. We know that many times, especially in the United States, portion sizes, not portion sizes on necessarily nutrition labels, but portion sizes that we receive in restaurants or portion sizes that we serve ourselves even at home, our eyes are bigger than our stomach, we like to say. And so intuitive eating, the basis of it is that we stop when we are physically full or when we're satiated physically rather than just finishing the plate. So the question is, does intuitive eating have any effect on mental health in adults? So I found two studies. Excuse me. The first one is studied the effects of intuitive eating on mental well-being and eating behaviors of health workers, which was interesting, all of which are adults. So specifically health workers for this study. The purpose was to research the effects that intuitive eating had on these health workers, on their mental health, and also their eating behaviors. The study, it was a cross-sectional study, and it studied a few other things, but we're going to focus on the mental health part. So the population was healthcare workers in a hospital in Turkey. There was 200 adult participants, 182 women, 82 men, from ages 18 to 61. So there was a 5-section questionnaire filled out by the researchers after they had received participants' answers to an application questionnaire electronically. And the 5 sections were the demographic information, their anthropometric measurements, and then to assess mental health or mental well-being in these people, they used the Beck Depression Inventory, or the BDI, which assesses the risk and severity of depression. The SCOFF questionnaire, which is the risk for eating disorders, because this study also studied the effect of intuitive eating on eating behaviors or risk for an eating disorder. And then to assess their adherence or their ability to eat intuitively, they used the Intuitive Eating Scale 2, or the IES-2, which is a 5-point scale, and a higher score, so a score of 5 indicates a better ability to eat intuitively. They used the Statistical Package for Social Sciences, or the SPSS, for their statistical analyses and the results. So the IES-2 mean score between all the participants was 3.5, and that was again out of 5. So group 1 was an IES score less than 3.6, so a lesser ability to eat intuitively. And group number 2 it had an IES score of greater than 3.6, so a better ability to eat intuitively. So group 1 with the lower IES score had a significantly higher BDI score, which remember is the depression index, which a higher score indicates a worsened mental state or a higher risk or severity of depression. And so a lower score of the intuitive eating scale indicated a higher risk or severity of depression. The normal mental well-being was lower in group number 1, and as IES-2 increased, so as there was an increased ability to eat intuitively, BDI, or the depression, was decreased. Group number 1 also had a higher SCOFF score, and the SCOFF score, if we remember from the last slide, was the eating behavior or risk of eating disorder. So we're not necessarily researching or doing a review here on eating disorders, but eating disorders has a large part to play with your physical, but also your mental health. So I wanted to put that in here, that the group that had the lower intuitive eating score had a higher risk for eating disorders, which plays a part into your overall mental health. So the conclusions are that adult healthcare workers who eat intuitively may have better mental well-being. A strength of the study is that it was the first study in Turkey to research these effects, but a limitation is that it was only on healthcare workers, and that external factors of mental health were not investigated, and also that all of these things were self-reported, especially with intuitive eating. If it's not fully understood, the results may be skewed. So study number 2 was intuitive eating is positively associated with indicators of physical and mental health among rural Australian adults. So very different population, though they are all adults. The purpose was to obviously investigate intuitive eating and the associations that it has with physical and mental health. Population was 200 randomly selected adults in rural Australia. A little over half were female, a little under half were male. So this was also a cross-sectional telephone survey. So the random digit dialing was used too, so it was completely randomized, and it consisted of some questions to answer. It used the Tilka intuitive eating scale, which is also out of 5, and the score of 4 and above was regarded as an intuitive eater, according to this study. They also asked questions for the SCOFF questionnaire, some anthropometric measurements, the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, Kessler 10, which was their scale for assessing mental health. They use the term psychological distress, and the body esteem scale. They use these statistical analyses, IBM SPSS 26, and the results were that intuitive eating presence occurred in 17.6% of the participants, and the mean IES score was 3.5. Moderate negative correlations occurred for both women and men between the IES scores and Kessler 10 scores, meaning that the higher intuitive eating score indicated lower psychological distress. There were also significant positive correlations between body esteem and IES scores for men and women. So those who ate intuitively had a higher body esteem, and for women, there was a significant positive correlation between overall self-esteem and their IES score. So the conclusions is that intuitive eating may increase body esteem and self-esteem, and also lower psychological distress, leading to improved mental health. As I talked about a little earlier, body esteem and self-esteem, in addition to eating disorder risk, play a huge part in mental health, so I wanted to include the body esteem and self-esteem here as well. The strengths in this study include random sampling in an under-researched population, limitations, again, self-reporting, and the cross-sectional design of the study. So comparisons and conclusions are that, though both studies included populations of adults, the specific populations of healthcare workers in Turkey and rural adults in Australia are very different populations. Both results show that a higher IES score or a higher ability to eat intuitively may improve mental health. Because even though the populations are so different, it may actually be a positive of these two studies working together, because it could mean that the results are more generalizable, and it could be brought in towards the public. Study number 1 used the Beck Depression Inventory score, whereas study number 2 used their Kessler 10 to assess psychological distress. They just had different indicators of mental health. And self-reporting was the basis of the intake of information for both studies, which can be tricky. Areas for future research. I think that intuitive eating is a very difficult thing to study, as it can be very abstract at times, especially to the participant. If the participant does not fully understand what intuitive eating is, what it looks like, or how it is practiced, their information or answers may accidentally skew the results because they're giving inaccurate answers accidentally. So a tighter description and parameter of what intuitive eating is and how it is practiced may be needed for future research to form controlled trials, but I do believe that randomized controlled trials are needed in this area of research to further develop recommendations for the public. Even if the research does show continually that intuitive eating does improve mental health, I think that there will need to be a lot of work put in to nutrition education programs to teach people what that really looks like and how to incorporate intuitively eating into their own lives and their own eating habits. And these are my references. Thank you.